A poor boy becomes millionaire by saving dog. But the next day, he learns she died. He couldn't believe he lost his best friend so quickly. Ethan shuffled along the cracked sidewalk, the weight of a long day pulling at his shoulders. The summer heat lingered, even as the sun dipped low on the horizon, casting a warm orange glow over the quiet streets. His neighborhood, a patchwork of worn houses and overgrown yards, was far from perfect, but it was home. At just 13 years old, Ethan carried responsibilities far beyond his age. Since his father passed away years ago, he had taken it upon himself to help his mom in any way he could. She worked long shifts at a nearby diner, often leaving early in the morning and coming home well past sunset. Ethan did his best to fill the gaps, cleaning, running errands, and keeping himself occupied in the long hours he spent alone. His favorite escape was the woods near their neighborhood. It was quiet there, with a small creek that sparkled in the sunlight and the occasional rustle of animals in the underbrush. On days when the world felt too heavy, Ethan would sit by the water and lose himself in the soothing rhythm of the current. Today, however, there was no time for wandering. Ethan carried a loaf of bread and a carton of milk under one arm, his mom's tired voice echoing in his mind. "Just grab the essentials, honey. Payday isn't until Friday." As he passed the old Miller estate, a once grand property that had fallen into disrepair, Ethan heard a faint rustling sound. He paused, looking toward the overgrown hedges that framed the tall wrought-iron gate. "Hello?" he called softly, stepping closer. The rustling stopped, and for a moment, the street was silent. Then, out of the shadow, a small, scruffy dog emerged, its head tilted to one side as it regarded him curiously. Ethan crouched down, setting the groceries aside. "Hey there, little guy," he said, his voice gentle. The dog hesitated, its matted fur bristling slightly, but its big dark eyes shone with a mix of curiosity and fear. It looked thin, as if it hadn't eaten properly in days. Around its neck was a frayed collar with a tarnished tag that dangled loosely. "Are you lost?" Ethan asked, extending a cautious hand. The dog sniffed the air, taking a tentative step closer. When it wagged its tail ever so slightly, Ethan felt a pang of relief. He reached out and lightly brushed his fingers over the dog's fur, which was tangled and dirty but soft beneath the grime. After a few minutes of quiet coaxing, the dog seemed to relax. Ethan gently turned the collar around to read the tag. "Buddy. If found, please call the Harris family." Ethan frowned, the name sparking a faint recognition. The Harris family lived across town, in the wealthiest neighborhood he'd ever seen. Their estate was a towering mansion with sprawling gardens and fancy cars parked in the driveway. They owned several businesses in the city, including the diner where his mom worked double shifts. "What are you doing all the way out here?" Ethan muttered, scratching behind the dog's ears. Buddy wagged his tail in response, his tongue lolling out in a happy pant. Ethan glanced at the sky, now tinged with the deep purple of twilight. It was too late to walk Buddy all the way back to the Harris estate tonight. He decided he would take the dog home and figure things out in the morning. "Come on, Buddy," Ethan said, picking up his groceries. "Let's get you cleaned up." The walk back to Ethan's house was uneventful, save for the occasional curious glance from a passerby. Buddy trotted along obediently, his energy returning with every step. When they reached the small one-story house Ethan shared with his mom, Buddy hesitated at the threshold. The house was modest, with peeling paint and a sagging porch, but Ethan loved it. It was where he and his mom had built a life together, however humble. "It's not much," Ethan said, opening the door, "but it's better than the street." Buddy followed him inside, sniffing curiously at the worn furniture and patched linoleum floor. Ethan filled a small bowl with water and set it down, smiling as Buddy drank eagerly. "You're gonna need a bath," Ethan said, wrinkling his nose at the dog's scruffy appearance. He grabbed an old towel and led Buddy to the small bathroom. The process was messy. Water splashed everywhere as Buddy squirmed in the tub, but when it was over, the dog looked noticeably better. His fur, now clean, was a warm golden color, and his eyes seemed brighter. "There," Ethan said, wrapping Buddy in the towel. "Now you look like someone's best friend." That night, Ethan made a small bed for Buddy out of an old blanket. The dog curled up quickly, letting out a contented sigh. As Ethan lay in his own bed, staring at the ceiling, he thought about the Harris family. They must be worried sick about Buddy. The dog's tag hadn't included a phone number, just the family's name. He would have to walk all the way to their estate tomorrow to return him. "Looks like we've got a long day ahead of us, huh, Buddy?" Ethan murmured. The dog gave a soft woof in reply, and Ethan smiled. For the first time in weeks, he felt like he was doing something meaningful. The morning sun bathed the neighborhood in a warm glow as Ethan woke to the sound of soft barking. Buddy was at the foot of his bed, wagging his tail and looking up at him expectantly. "You're an early riser, huh?" Ethan said with a yawn, rubbing the sleep from his eyes. He swung his legs off the bed and stretched, glancing at the clock on the wall. His mom had already left for work, her usual note waiting on the kitchen counter. "Love you, Ethan. Be safe today." Ethan poured some leftover soup into a bowl for Buddy, who ate eagerly. As the dog licked the bowl clean, Ethan grabbed a piece of toast for himself and slipped on his sneakers. "All right, Buddy, let's get you home," he said, grabbing the makeshift leash he had tied the night before. The walk to the Harris estate was long and tiring, but Ethan didn't mind. Buddy trotted happily beside him, pausing now and then to sniff at trees or chase a butterfly. Ethan couldn't help but smile at the dog's energy. As they reached the wealthier part of town, the contrast became striking. The houses here were enormous, with perfectly trimmed hedges and pristine driveways. Ethan's footsteps faltered slightly as he approached the Harris estate. The wrought iron gates were open, revealing a long driveway lined with blooming flowers and a sprawling white mansion at the end. "Wow," Ethan muttered under his breath. Buddy barked as if to reassure him, and they walked through the gates together. Ethan hadn't reached the front steps before the door swung open. A woman in her 40s, dressed in a crisp blouse and tailored pants, hurried out. Her eyes widened as she spotted Buddy, and she broke into a run. "Buddy!" she exclaimed, dropping to her knees as the dog rushed into her arms. The reunion was emotional. Buddy barked and wagged his tail furiously as the woman hugged him, tears streaming down her face. Ethan stood back, unsure of what to do. "You have no idea how much this means to us," the woman said, looking up at Ethan. "It's no problem," Ethan replied, shifting awkwardly. "I found him near the old Miller estate." The woman smiled, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "You're a lifesaver. Buddy's been missing for days. My name is Laura Harris. Please, come inside." The interior of the Harris mansion was like something out of a magazine. Marble floors gleamed under the sunlight streaming through towering windows, and ornate chandeliers hung from the high ceilings. Ethan followed Laura into the living room, where a man in a suit was pacing. When he saw Buddy, the man's face lit up. "You found him," the man said, kneeling beside Buddy to scratch his ears. He turned to Ethan. "Thank you so much. I'm Thomas Harris. You've made our day." Ethan shrugged. "I just did what anyone would have done." Laura handed Ethan a glass of lemonade and gestured for him to sit on one of the plush couches. "Well, it means the world to us," she said. As they sat and talked, Ethan explained how he had found Buddy and taken care of him overnight. Laura and Thomas listened intently, their gratitude evident. "You must let us do something to thank you," Thomas said. "Anything you need, just name it." Ethan shook his head. "It's okay, really. I just wanted to make sure Buddy got home safe." But Laura wouldn't take no for an answer. "At least let us give you something," she insisted. "A reward for your kindness." Before Ethan could protest, Buddy barked happily and jumped onto the couch beside him. Laura smiled at the sight. "Do you like dogs?" she asked. Ethan nodded, scratching Buddy's ears. "Yeah, I've always wanted one, but my mom says we can't afford to take care of a pet right now." Laura and Thomas exchanged a glance, and a flicker of an idea passed between them. After a while, Ethan stood to leave. He felt overwhelmed by the Harrises' generosity and the sheer size of their home. "Thank you for the lemonade," he said politely. "No, thank you," Laura replied, walking him to the door. "You did something really special today, Ethan. Don't forget that." Thomas handed Ethan an envelope as they said goodbye. "This is just a little something to show our gratitude. please take it?" Ethan hesitated, but eventually accepted the envelope. He walked back home, Buddy's joyful bark still echoing in his mind. When he reached his modest house and opened the envelope, he was stunned to find a check for $500. Ethan didn't know what to think. The money could help his mom with bills, groceries, and so much more. But it felt strange to accept it, for doing something that just felt like the right thing to do. As he sat on his bed that evening, Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that his brief encounter with the Harrises wasn't over. He glanced out the window at the fading light, wondering what would come next. Buddy had brought them together, but life had a way of throwing unexpected challenges into even the happiest moments. The days following Ethan's visit to the Harris estate felt surreal. The $500 check sat untouched on the kitchen counter, tucked safely under a ceramic bowl. Ethan hadn't told his mom about it yet. He wasn't sure how to explain where it came from. Every now and then, he thought about Buddy. The scruffy dog had made an impression on him in such a short time. Ethan had never seen a family so grateful for something as simple as returning a pet. It made him wonder if his kindness had truly made a difference. One afternoon, as Ethan walked home from the corner store, he spotted a sleek black car parked outside his house. Standing by the car was Laura Harris. She waved when she saw him, her smile bright and genuine. "Ethan, I hope you don't mind me stopping by," she said as he approached. No, not at all," Ethan replied, slightly flustered. "Is everything okay?" Laura nodded. "Everything's fine. I just wanted to check on you. And thank you again for what you did for Buddy. He's been so happy since." Ethan couldn't help but smile. "That's good to hear." Laura hesitated, then added, "I also wanted to invite you and your mom over to our house this weekend. We're having a little gathering, and we'd love for you to come." Ethan's heart skipped a beat. A gathering at their mansion? He couldn't imagine what that would even look like. "I'll ask my mom," he said. "Thanks for inviting us." The weekend came quickly, and Ethan and his mom arrived at the Harris estate feeling out of place among the polished cars and elegant guests. The gathering was a mix of family friends, business associates, and neighbors, all chatting over drinks and hors d'oeuvres. Buddy was the star of the evening, darting between guests and wagging his tail as people fussed over him. "Looks so much better now," Ethan said, crouching down to scratch Buddy's ears. "That's thanks to you," Laura said, appearing beside him. "He's been a different dog since he came home." Ethan felt a swell of pride, but before he could respond, a commotion erupted near the garden. "Buddy!" someone shouted. Ethan turned to see the dog darting through the open gate, chasing after a squirrel. A wave of panic rippled through the guests as Laura and Thomas called after him. "I'll get him!" Ethan yelled, sprinting after the dog. The chase led Ethan across the garden and down the street. Buddy was fast, his scruffy tail disappearing around corners just as Ethan caught sight of him. The adrenaline pushed Ethan forward, his lungs burning as he ran. Finally, he spotted Buddy in a clearing near the edge of the woods. The dog was sniffing around, oblivious to the worry he'd caused. "Buddy!" Ethan called, relieved. But as he stepped closer, a loud honk shattered the quiet. Ethan's head whipped around just in time to see a delivery truck barreling down the narrow street. Buddy, startled by the noise, froze in its path. "Buddy, move!" Ethan screamed, sprinting toward him. Everything happened in an instant. Ethan lunged for Buddy, pulling him back just as the truck skidded to a stop. They both tumbled to the ground, the momentum knocking the wind out of Ethan. For a moment, it seemed they were safe. But then Ethan noticed Buddy lying still beside him, his breathing shallow. "No, no, no," Ethan whispered, his hands shaking as he tried to rouse the dog. Buddy let out a soft whimper, his big eyes looking up at Ethan. A wave of dread washed over him as he realized something was terribly wrong. Laura and Thomas arrived minutes later, their faces pale as they took in the scene. Laura knelt beside Buddy, her hands trembling. "We need to get him to the vet," she said, her voice shaking. Thomas gently lifted Buddy into the back of the car, and Ethan climbed in with them. The drive to the emergency clinic was silent, save for Buddy's labored breathing. At the clinic, the vet worked quickly, but the news was grim. Buddy had suffered internal injuries, and despite their best efforts, there was nothing they could do. "I'm so sorry," the vet said, her voice heavy with sympathy. Laura broke down in tears, clutching Buddy's collar in her hands. Thomas wrapped an arm around her, his own face etched with grief. Ethan stood off to the side, his heart shattered. Guilt and sadness churned in his chest. He had done everything he could, but it hadn't been enough. The ride back to the Harris estate was somber. Ethan felt like an outsider in their grief, unsure of what to say or do. When they arrived, Laura turned to him, her eyes red from crying. "Ethan," she said softly, "you saved Buddy once, and you tried to save him again. That means everything to us. Please don't blame yourself." Ethan nodded, but the weight of the day clung to him. He couldn't shake the image of Buddy's trusting eyes in those final moments. That night, as Ethan lay in bed, he thought about how quickly life could change. In a matter of hours, a joyous gathering had turned into a heartbreaking loss. What he didn't realize was that this tragedy would forge an even deeper connection between him and the Harris family. A connection that would change his life in ways he never expected. The days following Buddy's death were quiet and heavy. Ethan couldn't stop replaying the events in his mind, the chase, the truck, and Buddy's final moments. He hadn't realized how much he'd come to care for the scrappy little dog until he was gone. The Harris family had taken the loss hard, especially Laura. She called Ethan's house the day after the incident, her voice still raw with emotion. "Ethan, I wanted to thank you again for everything," she said. "You tried so hard to save him, and that means the world to us." "It wasn't enough," Ethan said softly, gripping the phone tightly. "You gave us more time with Buddy," Laura replied. "That's something we can never repay, but we'd like to try. Thomas and I have been talking, and we want to do something for you. Can you come by the house tomorrow?" Ethan hesitated. He wasn't sure what else they could do. After all, they'd already given him a generous reward. Still, he agreed, curiosity outweighing his uncertainty. The next afternoon, Ethan stood outside the Harris estate once more. This time, the grandeur of the mansion didn't feel as intimidating. Laura greeted him warmly at the door and led him to the study, where Thomas was waiting. "Ethan," Thomas said, standing to shake his hand, "we've been thinking a lot about you and what you've done for us. You're an exceptional young man. Your kindness and bravery remind us of what really matters in life." Ethan shifted uncomfortably, unsure how to respond. Thomas gestured for him to sit. "We want to do something meaningful for you, something that can change your life. Tell us, what are your dreams? What do you want to do when you're older?" Ethan blinked, caught off guard by the question. No one had ever asked him that before. I don't know," he admitted. "I guess I just want to help my mom. She works so hard, and I want to make things easier for her." Laura smiled softly. "That's admirable, Ethan, but you should think about yourself too. You deserve a future filled with opportunities." Thomas nodded. "Here's what we'd like to do. We've set up an account in your name with $50,000. It's not just a gift, it's an investment. We want to teach you how to grow it, how to make it work for you." Ethan's eyes widened. $50,000? Thomas chuckled. "Yes, but here's the catch. It's up to you to decide how to use it. Laura and I will guide you if you're willing to learn. We'll teach you about investments, business, and responsibility. But you'll be the one making the decisions." Ethan stared at them, his mind reeling. It was overwhelming, but the offer also sparked something in him, a sense of possibility he'd never felt before. I don't know what to say," he stammered. "Say yes," Laura said with a smile. "We believe in you, Ethan, and we want to see you succeed." Over the next few weeks, Ethan found himself spending more time at the Harris estate. Thomas became a mentor, teaching him the basics of finance and business. Ethan learned about saving, investing, and taking calculated risks. At first, it was daunting. The numbers and terminology felt like a foreign language, but Thomas was patient, breaking everything down into simple, understandable steps. Laura, meanwhile, encouraged Ethan to dream bigger. "Think about what you're passionate about," she told him one day. "If you could do anything, what would it be?" Ethan thought about it for a long time. He loved the idea of creating something that could help others, something that could make life easier for kids like him. "What about a business that gives kids access to affordable school supplies?" he said one evening. "There are a lot of families in my neighborhood who struggle with that." Thomas smiled. "That's a great idea. Let's work on a plan." The months flew by as Ethan dove headfirst into his new venture. With Thomas and Laura's guidance, he used a portion of the investment to launch a small online store selling discounted school supplies. He named it Buddy's Basic in honor of the dog that had brought them together. The business started slow, but Ethan poured his heart into it. He spent hours after school managing orders, creating marketing posts, and learning the ins and outs of running a company. When the first profits started coming in, Ethan reinvested them wisely, following Thomas's advice. Before long, Buddy's Basic became a local success, with schools and community groups partnering with him to distribute supplies to families in need. One day, as Ethan sat at the Harris estate reviewing quarterly earnings with Thomas, Laura walked in with a smile. "Do you realize what you've accomplished, Ethan?" she said. "You've built something incredible, and you've done it all while staying true to who you are." Ethan looked down at the papers in front of him, his cheeks flushing with pride. He still couldn't believe how far he'd come. "It's all thanks to you and Mr. Harris," he said. Thomas shook his head. "No, Ethan. We gave you the tools, but you did the work. This success is yours." As Ethan walked home that evening, he thought about Buddy and how much had changed since the day he found the scruffy dog by the Miller estate. He couldn't help but feel that Buddy's presence had been more than just a coincidence. It had been the start of something extraordinary. The success of Buddy's Basics brought Ethan more than financial stability. It gave him a sense of purpose he had never felt before. His small online store had grown into a full-fledged business, with a small team of employees and a dedicated network of schools and community centers partnering with him. The sight of kids receiving supplies they needed was all the motivation Ethan needed to keep pushing forward. But success came with its own set of challenges. One rainy afternoon, Ethan sat in the Harris family's spacious study, poring over spreadsheets and inventory lists with Thomas. "We're running into supply chain delays," Ethan explained, frowning at the data. "If we don't figure this out, we might miss some of our key distribution days." Thomas leaned back in his chair, tapping his pen thoughtfully against his desk. "This is a big hurdle, Ethan, but it's also an opportunity. Have you considered sourcing locally? Smaller suppliers might not be able to handle massive orders, but they can often deliver faster and with fewer complications." Ethan's eyes lit up. "That's a great idea, and it would support small businesses too." "Exactly," Thomas said with a nod. "It's a win-win. Just remember, every decision you make now sets the tone for how your business grows in the future." That evening, Ethan got to work. He researched local suppliers and spent hours sending emails and making calls. It was exhausting, but Ethan refused to give up. By the end of the week, he had secured partnerships with 3 small businesses in the area, all eager to work with him. The shift wasn't just practical. It transformed Buddy's Basic into something even more meaningful. Ethan wasn't just helping kids anymore. He was uplifting other small businesses, creating a network of mutual support. One morning, as Ethan was reviewing new supplier contracts, Laura walked into the room holding an envelope. "You've got mail," she said, with a teasing smile. Ethan took the envelope, confused by the formal lettering. As he opened it, his heart skipped a beat. It was an invitation to a youth entrepreneur conference hosted by a major corporation. "They're inviting me?" Ethan asked, incredulous. Laura grinned. "Why not? You've built a successful business from scratch and made a real impact in your community. You deserve to be there." The conference, held in a bustling city a few hours away, was unlike anything Ethan had ever experienced. The venue was sleek and modern, filled with young entrepreneurs from around the country. Ethan listened to panel discussion, attended workshops, and even got the chance to present Buddy's Basics to an audience. During his presentation, he shared the story of Buddy and how a simple act of kindness had sparked his journey. The audience was captivated, and by the end of his speech, Ethan received a standing ovation. After his presentation, Ethan was approached by a man in his 40s with a warm smile and a firm handshake. "Ethan, that was an incredible story," the man said. My name is Marco Reyes. I'm the founder of Reyes Innovation, and I'd love to talk to you about a potential partnership. Marco explained that his company specialized in logistics and had been looking for ways to support small businesses. What you've built is inspiring, Marco said. We want to help you scale your operations while staying true to your mission. Think of us as the missing piece in your supply chain puzzle. Ethan was hesitant at first. He didn't want to lose control of his vision or compromise his value. But after several meetings and in-depth discussion, it became clear that Marco shared his commitment to helping underserved communities. With Marco's support, Buddy's Basics expanded its reach. New warehouses were established, and Ethan's team grew to include logistics experts and community liaisons. The business became a regional powerhouse, delivering school supplies to thousands of children across multiple states. As Buddy's Basics grew, so did Ethan's platform. He was invited to speak at schools and conferences, sharing his story and encouraging others to follow their dreams. During one of these events, Ethan was approached by a young boy who reminded him of himself, shy, eager, and full of potential. "Mr. Ethan," the boy said, clutching a notebook. "How did you know you could do it? Start a business, I mean." Ethan crouched down, meeting the boy's eyes. "I didn't know," he said honestly. "I just took it one step at a time, and I asked for help when I needed it." The boy smiled, and Ethan felt a deep sense of fulfillment. One afternoon, as Ethan and Thomas reviewed the latest quarterly reports, Laura walked in holding a small framed photo. It was a picture of Buddy, taken during his first day back at the Harris estate. "I thought this should have a special place," she said, placing the frame on Ethan's desk. Ethan smiled, his chest tightening with emotion. "It's perfect." Buddy had been more than just a dog. He had been a catalyst for change, bringing people together and inspiring Ethan to dream big. "Every time I look at this," Ethan said, "I'll remember where it all started." Years passed, and Ethan's life transformed in ways he could never have imagined. From a humble teenager running a small online store, he had grown into a confident entrepreneur, overseeing a thriving enterprise that served thousands of families across the country. Buddy's Basic was no longer just a business. It was a movement. But even as his success grew, Ethan never forgot his roots. He still lived in the same neighborhood, now in a renovated house he shared with his mom. She had finally been able to leave her grueling job at the diner, spending her days volunteering at local schools and community centers. Ethan's success wasn't just his own, it was theirs. One crisp autumn afternoon, Ethan was sitting in his office at the Harris estate. Thomas had insisted years ago that Ethan use one of the rooms as his personal workspace, saying it was the least they could do to support him. The framed photo of Buddy sat on the desk, a constant reminder of how far he had come. As he reviewed plans for a new initiative, providing free laptops to underserved schools, Laura knocked on the door. "Ethan," she said, her expression warm. "You've got a visitor downstairs." Ethan frowned. "Who is it?" "You'll want to see for yourself," Laura replied with a knowing smile. Curious, Ethan headed downstairs. Standing in the grand entryway was a man in his 40s, dressed in a simple jacket and jeans. His posture was nervous, and his eyes darted around the room. "Can I help you?" Ethan asked, his voice polite but cautious. The man turned, his expression softening. "You're Ethan Carter, right? The founder of Buddy's Basics?" Ethan nodded. "That's me." The man took a deep breath. "I'm Jason, Buddy's original owner." Jason explained that he had adopted Buddy as a puppy, but had to give him up when financial struggles forced him to move and downsize. "I didn't want to let him go," Jason said, his voice breaking. "But I thought he'd have a better life with the Harris family. I never knew what happened to him after that." Ethan listened, his heart aching for the man. "Buddy was incredible," he said softly. "He changed my life in ways I never thought possible." Jason smiled faintly. "I can see that. When I heard about your business and how it's named after him, I had to come see for myself. It's amazing what you've built." Ethan felt a swell of gratitude. "Buddy was the reason I started all this. He brought people together, and that's what I want to keep doing." Ethan invited Jason to stay for dinner, where they shared stories about Buddy and the impact he had made. As they talked, Ethan realized something important. While he had honored Buddy's memory through his work, there was more he could do to pay it forward. The next day, Ethan announced the creation of the Buddy Foundation, a nonprofit dedicated to providing pet care and supplies to families in need. The foundation's mission was simple: to ensure no one had to give up a beloved pet due to financial hardship. Jason was named an honorary board member, helping to guide the foundation's initiative. For him, it was a chance to turn his pain into purpose, giving back to the community and ensuring Buddy's legacy would live on. Months later, the first Buddy Foundation event was held at the Harris estate. Families from across the city gathered to receive free pet supplies, medical care, and training sessions. The atmosphere was lively, filled with laughter and the excited barks of dogs. Ethan stood at the center of it all, watching as kids played with their pets and parents exchanged stories. "You've built something incredible," Thomas said, clapping a hand on Ethan's shoulder. "Not just me," Ethan replied, smiling. "All of this was because of Buddy. And because you and Mrs. Harris believed in me," Thomas chuckled. "You had it in you all along, Ethan. We just gave you a little push." As the sun set that evening, Ethan stood on the front steps of the estate, watching families load their cars with supplies and wagging tails. Jason joined him, holding a cup of coffee. "You've come a long way," Jason said, his voice filled with admiration. Ethan nodded, his gaze fixed on the horizon. "I've been lucky, and I want to keep paying it forward." In the distance, a child laughed as a golden retriever chased after a ball. Ethan smiled, feeling a sense of peace. Buddy might have been gone, but his legacy was alive in every family helped, every child given a chance, and every connection forged through kindness. Did this story of resilience and kindness move you? Share your thoughts in the comments below. What inspired you the most about Ethan's journey? Don't forget to like, subscribe, and explore more uplifting tales of hope and transformation on our channel. See you next time for another unforgettable story.